2 Chronicles chapter 14. And we're recapping some of the stuff of the Old Testament before we begin the New Testament. And we're also coming into the last day of our Daniel fast. Right? 2 Chronicles chapter 14. If you would, if you're able, stand to your feet as we read the word of the Lord. We're going to begin in verse 2. Beginning in verse 2. Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord his God. He removed the foreign altars in the high places, smashed the sacred stones, and cut down the Asherah poles. He commanded Judah to seek the Lord, the God of their fathers, and to obey his laws and commands. He removed the high places and incense altars in every town in Judah, and the kingdom was at peace under him. He built up the fortified cities of Judah, since the land was at peace. No one is at war with him during those years, for the Lord gave him rest. Let us build up these towns, he said to Judah, and put walls around them, with towers, gates, and bars. The land is still ours, because we have sought the Lord our God. We sought him, and he has given us rest on every side. So they built and prospered. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. Okay, so Asa is a king in Israel, actually in Judah, about 900 BC. So about 900 years before Jesus. Asa is the great-great-grandson of David. So there's Asa. Asa's dad is Abijah. Abijah's dad is Rehoboam. Rehoboam's dad is Solomon. And Solomon's dad is David. Now, here's what you have to understand. You have to kind of understand the stage of what's happening here. So David was king, and David was a good king. And then you had Solomon, who was a pretty good king. And then Rehoboam comes. And Rehoboam comes along. He's young. He's naive. He's like, I know how to do this. I know how to run a kingdom better than my dad does. And I'm not going to listen to his old people advisors. I'm going to get my friends in, and we're going to show them how it's done. It's done with force, with brutality. And Rehoboam just blows it right off the get-go. The kingdom ends up dividing under his reign immediately. There's kind of a civil war. They split up. And Rehoboam is left with Judah and this kind of small part of this fragmented Israel. And so they split up. And Rehoboam chooses not to follow God. He doesn't follow this God Yahweh the way his dad did or the way his father David did, because he's a rebel, and he knows how to do everything. So he does it his own way. And then Rehoboam's son, Abijah, is the same way. Abijah does not obey God. Abijah worships other gods, lets the people worship all the other gods, and they focus more on taking care of the politics of the nation rather than the God who demands these politics of the nations. And then comes Asa. And Asa's different. Asa is raised up and decides he wants to follow this God Yahweh. Now, by the time Asa comes to become a king, because the people haven't followed God, there's a great fear in the nation. There's a lot of things happening. For one, there's political unrest. They're afraid of Egypt. They're afraid that at any moment, Egypt is going to rise up with their big old army, and they're going to come and they're going to destroy this kind of fragmented, still trying to recoup country. So they're panicking about Egypt. They have economic problems due to the split that's just happened. They're trying to figure out who they are, where they're going to make money, where the source of income comes. They struggle with famines. They don't have the support of 10 of the tribes like they used to. So they have economic problems. They have warring problems. There's just this unrest that's kind of happening throughout Judah and Israel. And then to top it all off, the people are mixing pagan worship with their Yahweh worship. They decided, yes, we still worship this God Yahweh. He's still our God. But we also worship all the Baals, and we worship the Azarus, and we worship all of these other things that are out there, Molech, or whatever the other gods are. We're going to worship all of them as needed, because you know what? I got to cover all my bases. And I got to make sure that I got a God for every occasion, for every need. And there are a lot of things happening. And to be fair, Yahweh's good. He's a good general God. But sometimes I need a God who's more specific. So I'm going to worship a God that's more specific to my need at the time. So they've done all this for quite a while. And they did this until Asa comes up. And Asa, he decides, I'm not going to do this. And this is the passage that we just read. Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord. So he removes the altar. He tells people, we're not doing this no more. We're going to clean house. And the problem isn't that we don't have a big enough army. The problem isn't that we don't have enough jobs or good enough health care. The problem with our nation is quite simply we don't worship God. So we're going to fix that. That's the first thing we're going to do. So he goes and he destroys a bunch of the, what does it say, the foreign altars, the high places. He smashes the sacred stones. He cut down the Asherah poles. And he commands Judah, he says, seek the Lord, the God of your fathers. Obey this God, Yahweh. Obey his laws and his commands. And so he's considered good and right in the eyes of the Lord God. Now, what Asa had done is he's cleansed the land. He cleansed the land of these things that distract the people from focusing on God and on placing their hopes into the hands of false idols, these fantasies, these things that aren't real. And because he does this, there's peace in the land. They find peace and they find prosperity simply by starting to worship God, doing what God tells them to do. And so this is why he's called good. I mean, you would say that's good, right? That's good. If we were as Christians to put ourselves in Asa's place, say, I walked into a situation where there was bad economics, there was fear of war, there was fear of bad, no jobs, there's uncertainty, and I can fix all these things politically like a king, try to fix it, or I can look at the people and say, hey, we're not following God, and say, hey, I need to follow God. So in my own life, I see these things, say, I'm going to start following God, I'm going to do what Jesus says, that's going to be good, and what's going to happen? I'm going to be a good Christian, right? People would call me a good Christian for doing these things. And that'd be awesome. That's a great way. That's what we're supposed to be. We come to God, and very often when we do this, we see the problems in our lives. I have marital problems maybe, or financial problems, or I'm an addict, or I'm just alone, or whatever it is. We come to God and we begin to clean out some of the things in our lives. And as you clean out some of the things in your lives, you become more, I don't know a better word for it, so I'm going to use this word I'm making up. You become more Christian-y. Does that make sense? Y'all get that, being more Christian-y? Because we see that, right? We see that in this whole being a Christian thing. It's not a yes-no thing. For us, we see it's more of a spectrum. It's kind of on one side of the spectrum, there's I said a prayer and I'm good, so I know I'm going to go to heaven. And then on the other side of the spectrum is I'm very pious and righteous and I don't do anything. And when the waiter asks if I want more water, I tell him, if you knew the water that Jesus gave you, you would have waters eternally dwelling from inside your heart, right? There's this spectrum of Christianity. And we all want to be somewhere on that spectrum that's kind of safe. We would all call ourselves Christians. That's why we're here. But we all know that we're kind of on this spectrum. So instead of being on I'm just doing the God thing, you're not a real good Christian. We say the people who kind of follow God, they're good Christians. And that's what we want to be. We want to be good Christians on this spectrum of being good. And so we start to see things in our life when we do this. When we start to become these good Christians, we start to see maybe our marriage gets better, right? My marriage starts to get better because I'm following Jesus. Raising kids becomes slightly better. Your finances might be better because we know, the scriptures talk about how to treat our finances. You feel better. You have this better health. And typically we accept that when we do these things and these things happen, that this is what it means to be a Christian. To be in obedience to God. And to be in obedience, God means that we're much better than most people. Because if there's this spectrum, I said the Jesus prayer and the waters are flowing out of everything that I see, then there's also those people who aren't even on the spectrum yet. They're not the Christians. So we know that by following Jesus, my life is a little better than theirs. Because I'm following Jesus, I'm obeying Him, and things are starting to get better. So this is where Asa is at. Asa is at, I started following God, things got better. That's to be expected. And he's doing good. He's by all intents and purposes, he's following the status quo of what it means to be someone who follows God, maybe. In fact, by comparison to the rest of the world, they might even tell him, dude, you're like going over the top, smashing all the Asherah poles and doing all these things. You are seriously following God. But then something weird happens. When you go to 2 Chronicles 15, instead of God coming to him and saying, Asa, you're doing great, high five, way to keep it up, Asa is confronted by a priest. This priest comes to him and it says in 15:1, the Spirit of God came upon Azariah, the son of Oded. He went out to meet Asa and he said to him, listen to me, Asa and all Judah and Benjamin. The Lord is with you and you are with him. If you seek him, he will be found by you. But if you forsake him, he will forsake you. For a long time, Israel was without the true God, without a priest to teach, and without the law. But in their distress, they turned to the Lord, the God of Israel, and sought him, and he was found by them. In those days, it was not safe to travel about, for all the inhabitants of the land were in great turmoil. One nation was being crushed by another, one city by another, because God was troubling them with every kind of distress. But as for you, be strong, don't give up, for your work will be rewarded. When Asa heard these words of the prophecy, the Azariah, the son of Obed the prophet, he took courage. Now, so far, here's what's happening. They're saying, the people once didn't obey God, they are now. You're starting to see change. That's what we expected. I'm being a good Christian, things are changing, that's what I expect to hear from God. The very next verse, the very next sentence, and I don't have it on here, I forgot to put it on there, sorry Mark. It says, when Asa heard the words of the prophet Azariah, the son of Oded the prophet, he took courage. He removed the detestable idols from the whole land of Judah and Benjamin, and from the towns that he had captured in the hills of Ephraim. He repaired the altar of the Lord that was in front of the portico of the Lord's temple. So here's what happened. Asa was already doing what God told him to do, right? He was already worshiping God. He was already changing. And when God came to him and said, listen, you need to keep doing this, stay on track with this, because if you don't, it's going to go bad again. But if you do, it'll get better. So stay with this. So what does Asa do? He doesn't say, hey, good job, guys. He goes back and he says, let's see what else we need to clean out. And he takes out even more. He finds more altars. He smashes more of the idols. He gets more on fire for God, if you will. He becomes another stage of righteous, another stage of holiness. They tell him basically, look, don't let your guard down. You're only safe as you obey God, as you hear the word of the priest. Now, here's the thing with this, for me. I used to struggle with this idea of holiness. I used to struggle with it, not just in the church, but even before I was in the church, I struggled with the idea of holiness. Because for me, when I heard the word holiness, what I heard was self-righteousness. Or people who had this holier-than-thou attitude. Oh, you're holy. You're not just a Christian, you're holy. I get it. Or you practice holiness. You think you're better than me. So I heard it as this hypocrisy of people who couldn't attain what they claimed to proclaim anyway. And I rolled my eyes when I heard it, and I thought, you are not what I ever want to be. And this is how I think a whole lot of people hear holiness, even within the church. When we talk about holiness, we often think, yeah, I know, I get it. We're going to be holy, but I'm not going to go all the way to that end of the spectrum because that would be over the top. You have to find this balance, this middle ground where you worship God, but you're not offensive to others, or where you're not over the top being a fake. And I really do, that a lot of people feel this way. Like if you act too holy, then you're acting like Ned Flanders on The Simpsons. And then you have this holier-than-thou attitude, it's hypocritical. And we start to say things like, no one can be perfect, so to act like it's ridiculous. You can't be perfect, so why do you pretend that you are? Why would you try to do something that you're not? Why would you try to be something that you are not? That's hypocritical. And so in general, what happens in the churches, and this is probably any church that you go to in America today, I dare say probably the world, but I'm really sure that this is happening in America. You walk into any Christian church, and what you're going to do is you're going to find a bunch of Christians who are content with aiming for the status quo as Christians. We're content with saying, well, here's what it looks like to be a good Christian. One, I don't cheat on my spouse, so no cheating, that's bad. I attend church pretty regularly. If I make it more than half of the month, I'm attending pretty regularly. It means being nicer than I am mean. That means that I'm better than I am bad. I'm not a bad person. I do more good than I do bad. And it means, of course, knowing what Christmas is all about. I never put Xmas on my roof. I always say Christmas. By the way, if you knew anything about Xmas, you would know that the X is actually biblical, and me as the X stands for Christos. But it means knowing what Christmas is really about. I don't get drunk every day. No drugs. Drugs are bad. We don't do drugs. You don't cuss all the time. I save F-bombs when they're really necessary in certain places with certain people, and occasionally, that way they add some spice to it, or with my cool friends who aren't church people, because I don't want them to think that I'm too churchy for them. And then I drop a few of the other bombs, because they're allowed on TV, especially after 10 o'clock at night. And once I've heard it on South Park, it's all right. So I do that, but I don't cuss all the time. Like when I come to church, never hear me cuss, and I never cuss in front of the pastor or his family. You know, the basics. And let's be honest, this right there, that list, if you did just that, you would be considered by most of this world an above average Christian. That's a reality. That's a fact right there. And this is the status quo. This is what we think it means to be a Christian. These things more than meet the status quo of the Christian. And here's the thing. If you do these things, I'm not going to lie to you. If this is all you do, just this little list of things I did here, your life is going to get better. Your life will change for the better just by doing these things. That's true. And here's how I know. Because if you don't cheat on your spouse, you're probably not going to get divorced. And not getting divorced is a good thing, right? If I go to church occasionally, then I'm going to meet other people who believe like me. And it's good to hang out with people who believe like me. That's a good thing. And if I'm nice to people, that makes me a better person and people like me better. And if I don't get drunk and I don't do drugs, let me tell you something. It does wonders for job security. It really does. It does wonders for not going to jail. And it does wonders for your health. I'm not going to lie. Meth is not good for you. It does not have vitamin C in it or anything like that. You're going to die. It's rat poison. All of the status quo that you do here, they're going to bring you peace. They're going to bring you stability. They're even going to bring prosperity into your life. They're going to do all the things that happened to Asa. And this is where Asa and the kingdom were. But God comes back to him. Because here's the reality of it. The kingdom was not going to end with Asa. It's not. And your lives don't even end with you. Because regardless of who you are, you leave a legacy in this world. Whether it be to your family, to your children, to your spouse, to your neighbor, to the people around you, you do leave a legacy in this world. You don't get to do anything in a vacuum. There's no such thing as, this is just my business. We talked about this last week. Everything that you do affects everyone. So yes, it is my business. Because your actions affect this world, which affect my babies, and that's my business. This is a reality for everyone. And so it does start to change things, and things go on bigger and further than me and even what I am. And there was more at stake than just this immediate peace that Judah felt. There's more at stake in my life even than immediately not losing my family. When me and Trina got together, I'm not going to lie, the odds for us staying together were not good. But because of Christ, because we started going to church and following things changed. My love for my wife changed from a lust to a genuine love for who she is, so that now I don't want to cheat on her. I don't want to do these things. I have no attraction to anybody else. And because of that, it gets better. We start to trust each other. It works out. It's good. Right? These things work. When I stopped drinking and stopped doing drugs, it got so much better. This is the same is true of your life, even when you realize it or not. What you do is going to immediately have impacts on you, but it's bigger than that. Because my kids have something to do. Their children, the church that I pastor now is going to be here longer than me. I'm not going to be here forever. And this church will continue to do the work that God has called it to. But when we're confronted with becoming even more righteous, even more holy, we become really apprehensive. I mean, after all, people are going to talk. They're going to think I'm judgy, and I don't want to be that. And it's hard. It's difficult. And look, here's the reality. You got to understand. I can't be perfect, so why not set the bar at a level that we can attain and feel victorious? Right? And this is a mentality that we have a lot of. I've seen it a lot because we struggle with it a lot, and I struggle with it a lot during this fast. I think it should be a good example of us. The fast was to a Daniel fast, which is fruits and vegetables and water for 21 days. But let's be honest, what did a lot of us do immediately? I can't do that. And so what did we do? We set the bar somewhere that's difficult, but I can attain it. And we say, that's fair, that's what I do. I set the bar to something that's attainable. It'd be ridiculous to set the bar at something that I can't attain, to something that I can't do. And so we start to set the bar where it's at, and what happens in our life, I don't know if you've noticed throughout the generations, when we do that is we teach people to keep bringing this bar lower and lower and lower. That way we can attain it, and they can take care of it, and we give them big high fives because, man, you accomplished this amazing thing. You got through it. And we start to worry about other people doing it. We start to bring other people down. Why are you going to try that? Because even if you try it, you're going to fail. So you shouldn't even bother doing that. There are a lot of reasons that we're apprehensive about doing more house cleaning in our lives, if you will. But this is important that we don't give in to that. It's important that we treat it differently. And I want to explain to you why. I showed you this illustration, I want to say a year and almost a half ago. I've been here for quite a while now, right shortly after I got here. But I want to walk you through this illustration again because it really brings this point here, and it's really important. To do it, I got to tell you a little bit about my little brother Rico. For those who don't know, Rico's my youngest brother, and me and him, we're really close. We're definitely the closest of the siblings. We've done a lot of things together. We have a lot of things in common, which is probably why we're close. One of the things that we like to do is we like to go shooting. Now, that being said also, being siblings, we're also super competitive. And we love to watch the other one fail. Not only do we love to watch the other one fail, we love to embarrass them publicly and any time we can. We love to shame each other at every opportunity because that's what good brothers do, right? I mean, it's almost funny how far we do this. But we love to go shooting. And so one day, me and Rico decided that we were going to go out, we were going to go shooting some guns. So we go to the shooting range, and we took out some targets. I clicked that on you, didn't I, Mark? Sorry. And we took out some targets to go shooting. And they're just blank targets. Y'all seen targets, right? They look like this. And if you don't know how a target works, this middle part, that's called the what? Bullseye. Right? What happens if you hit that? You win. That's good. That's where you want to hit. That's what I'm aiming for. So we take them out, we set them up, and I'm looking at this bullseye going, I'm a nail. So we set these targets at 50 yards out to go shooting. So we get these targets, we set them to go out, and I go to set it up, and Rico gets his up there, and Rico does something to his target that really starts to bother me. Show the next slide, Mark. See, I don't know if you can see that right there. You see that in the middle? That's a thumbtack. Rico decided he was putting a thumbtack in the middle of the bullseye. He says, that's what I'm aiming for. I thought, oh, a little cocky, aren't we? It's all right. It's okay. Whatever. I'm going to embarrass you today because I know I shoot better than Rico does. I'm better than him at everything because I'm the older one. That's why God made me first. So he puts this thing in there, and I'm thinking, he says, you want a pin to put in there? No, I'm not putting a pin in mine. Mine's fine. Mine's adequate because I know this, hunting, that anytime I hit this bullseye, I kill. That's a kill shot. I'm done. I've hit what I'm aiming for. I don't need to aim better than that. That's stupid. And why would you do that? You're wasting a perfectly good thumbtack, right? You probably stole it from mom, and I'm going to tell on you. So he sets this thing up there. I'm like, I'm not doing it. This is plenty good what I'm doing. And as we went up to go shoot, let me tell you something. I was expecting him to fail. I was absolutely expecting him to fail. He had this holier-than-thou attitude, and I looked forward to knocking him down a notch or two. As many of us are today. We hear people with this, and we struggle with this, and we know that if they're to do it, we might try to knock them down, so we're afraid to try it. Because we think if we aim for something like that, someone's going to try to knock us down a notch or two. I mean, as a pastor, as a father, I worry about this because I see it even in my own family. People get angry and they think, well, your kids have special privileges. I've heard this before. Your kids, it's not fair that your kids have the special advantage, but that's okay. They're pastor kids, so they're probably going to turn out worse because that's what happens with pastor kids. They always end up being the most rebellious. You ever heard that? Pastor's kids become the most rebellious. And I know I say this a lot, but it bothers me to hear that because it's just not true. In fact, statistical facts, it's not. The Barna Group shows that 93% of pastors' kids end up maintaining their faith into adulthood. 93%. Pastors' kids actually have a better chance of surviving it in the long haul than those kids who aren't. Rhonda's a good example. We have a pastor's kid right here. Right? We have some PKs in the house today who are here in the church worshiping God. But we still look to them to doing this. And in our minds, we think they have to be that. So we look to the rebellious. We expect the rebellious. We even almost embrace the rebellious and even maybe hope for it. And the point is that we expect those who aim the highest to fall the furthest. And we have this tendency to despise those who challenge the status quo because what they're doing for us is they're challenging me. You're saying that I'm not good enough, that I should attain what you're doing. So I took my shots. And Enrico took his shots. Here's my shots. I want to show you guys. I'm a pretty good shot. These are my 5 shots here. Right? There's the bullseye. Bam. Here's the shots. They landed. Now, this one, I'm arguing. This one touches the red. It touches the red. But I'm going to show grace and humility because my mama raised a humble kid, unlike Rico. Okay? So I'm going to call that outside the bullseye. I'm going to call that. So that means out of 5 shots, 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 shots are in the bullseye, 1's not. Man, 80%. Woo! 80% success. That's some good shooting, I think, right? I mean, I'm no Chris Kyle, but that's good stuff right there. Okay? So then Rico takes his 5 shots. Now let me show you Rico's 5 shots. This is Rico's bullseye. Rico hit it 0, 0, 0. Oh, yeah, he missed them all. Failed. Rico got 0% at what he was aiming at. He absolutely failed. He failed every single shot. I can honestly go home and I could have told my mom, Mom, I succeeded 80% of my shots and Rico succeeded 0% because he's a big fat loser. Sorry, Mama. That's okay. You got me. Now, when we hear numbers like that, what happens? We start to think, yeah, that's real. Hey, I'm 80% successful. They're 0% successful. They failed 100% of the time. And this reality, this mentality, I know it sounds kind of silly, and I know you probably think you know where we're going with this, but this mentality is why we struggle with this. This is why we as Christians are afraid to aim for perfection, because we're afraid we're going to fail. In fact, we're probably sure that we're going to fail. I'm not perfect, and since I'm not perfect, I'm probably going to miss what I'm aiming for, and then I'm going to be called out on it. They're going to call me out, call me a hypocrite. They're going to say, oh, you tried doing that, but you failed. You tried to quit smoking and you went back to it. You tried to quit drugs and you went back to it. I knew you couldn't do it. You tried to quit drinking, you tried to do that. But people never change. And we keep each other down. It's horrible how much we do this. But we are good at keeping each other down. And so we're afraid to try because we know we're going to fail. We know that we're likely to fail. And we're afraid to take that big swing at it. But look at it. Look at his target. I want you to look at it a little further away and let's see something that you probably already see. I mean, look at that grouping. He still missed. He's still a loser. I'm not conceding that I didn't win. But it's starting to look pretty decent when you look at the big picture, isn't it? See, this is the reality. Of all the things I wanted to call my brother, I wanted to call him a self-righteous know-it-all who couldn't accomplish what he aimed for. But keep in mind, I succeeded 80% of the time. Rico failed 100% of the time. I can rightfully say I was the success, he was the failure. Compare them together. Here's my shots again, right? I got it upside down there. You see my shots? Okay? Now here's Rico's in there. Look at the comparison. Y'all are seeing what I'm seeing, right? Oh, man. Thanksgiving's not going to taste the same this year. I'm going to get that look at him going, good thing you didn't hunt for the turkey. Rico's shots failed. Keep that in mind. He was a failure at what he aimed for. He was a 100% failure at what he aimed for. I at least succeeded 80% at what I was doing. But in his failure, Rico was a better shot than I was in my success. You get that? In his failure, he did better than I did in my success. This is why holiness matters. This is why God says, be holy as your God is holy. Because you're going to fail. Make no mistake. You're going to miss. And while our failure rate is going to increase as you continue to aim for perfection, your righteousness will surpass that of those who refuse to obey Christ when He said, be perfect, therefore, as your Father in heaven is perfect. You hear that? You're not supposed to try to be perfect. All right, well then tell Jesus that or just call Him a liar, because those are your two options. Because Jesus said, be perfect, therefore, as your Father in heaven is perfect. And when He says this, no, He's not saying be perfect as in you never miss a ball you swing at, or you never trip up, or you never do this. In fact, the word that He uses here, I think we talked about this before, is a telos. It's that goal. He says, be telos, be aiming for this final thing. When Jesus says this, He says this towards the end of that Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, when He starts to talk to us about what it means to be kingdom people, about what it is that the kingdom is. That it's not about this, I'm going to punish the enemies, send them to this place in heaven, I'm going to do and send the good guys to heaven and the bad guys to hell. He starts to tell them that the kingdom is this way of life that I've called you to, that originally created you, that I'm going to restore. This is the kingdom. This is what it looks like. You'll do this. You'll no longer say, divorce my wife, but you'll understand how important it is. You'll no longer look for loopholes. You'll start to love your enemy. You'll turn the other cheek. You'll give 2 coats instead of 1. This is what it looks like when I return. This is what my kingdom looks like, and this is what I want you to start aiming for. He says, be perfect. Aim for that. He doesn't say aim for something less. Aim for what you can handle. Aim for what's A-okay, and then strive to do better next time. He says, aim for that. You aim for that perfect kingdom, or you're not aiming for what I told you to, period. You don't get an in-between. You don't get to be a Christian and say, I'm status quo. Because if you say you're a Christian who's status quo, you're in direct disobedience to Christ. You are genuinely rejecting the God you claim to be your king. You live in hypocrisy. The only Christian who's not a hypocrite is the Christian who aims for perfection while relying on this grace of God. That is the only true Christian. That's what you're called to aim for perfection. And not even some thumbtack in the middle. You're called to aim for this pinpoint, this absolutely laser tight focus spot of perfection. That's who He calls us to. But the realization that they couldn't be perfect was why Israel struggled so much. God says to bring Him the perfect sacrifice, but they're already blemished. And says, I can't bring Him one that's perfect. So over the course of time, it turned into not even bringing Him my best, but bringing Him my trash. They literally started bringing God the stuff that they were going to kill and throw away anyway. They brought God their sewage and their garbage and said, I can't have perfection, so here you go, God. This is what happens when we don't aim for holiness in every instance. If I think I'm going to be a status quo Christian, I will end up leaving a legacy of bringing my sewage and my trash to God. And we will end up in the situation Israel was in. This was a real struggle. Why bother since I can't be perfect? This was a real struggle for the kings, the priests, and the people. And as they lowered the standard of holiness, it resulted in the increase of suffering, oppression, and fear of the people. As you lower your standard of holiness, it will increase in suffering and fear and all the problems of your people, of your own life. And we forget so often that our lives have bigger impacts than we can see. We get so hung up on this immediate thing. I need to take care of this problem now. I have a fire in front of me now, and I need to be happy now, and I need to do this now. And if this can save my marriage now, or this can take care of pacifying my children now, then we're going to do that. And we have very short, narrow vision. We're not really good at seeing far. We shoot 50 yards, if you will, at a time. But here's the reality. I don't know how many of y'all have ever been hunting, but you rarely get that 50-yard shot. That's pretty much the deer jumping in the plate. It doesn't happen. So if we're only shooting 50 yards, I'm fine. I'm killing all day at 50 yards. If you're only shooting a status quo, you're fine. You're right. It's going to be fine for the little bit of your life that you have. It's going to be absolutely fine. But it's not going to last. You're not leaving anything that's going to last in this world for your children, for the world around you, or even the impact around you. Because what would have happened if we'd have done this exact same thing and me and Rico started shooting at 200 yards, which is a little more realistic of a shot? Then it looks something like this. Go ahead, Mark. 2 more. This is my worst shot and Rico's worst shot. At 4 times the distance at 200 yards. Aiming the way he did, this is where Rico's going to be. You see that right there? This is body mass. Bam! He's still taking dinner home. You see this? This is my shot. I was a bullseye guy. What are you talking about? But now at 200 yards, I'm touching the edge of the target. That means that if I'm lucky, I'm going to spend the day tracking down a wounded animal. If I'm lucky. But more than likely, I'm going to go hungry. If I treat my holiness like this, yeah, my marriage is going to get good on the short set, but on the long set, I'm going to be lucky if it survives. I'm going to be lucky if my kids survive going through my Christianity. I'm going to be lucky if it leaves a real legacy in the world. I'm going to be lucky if my church makes any real impact other than we got our bills paid for the year and it looked good while the pastor was here. But this church has a legacy that's bigger than me. I expect it to last longer than me because God's bigger than me, in case you didn't know it. He was here long before I was here. He'll be long after I am. And so we have to think long term into the big thing. Imagine that shot at 400 yards. Look at this. 400 yards. This is generations out. Rico is still making a difference. I'm just scaring stuff. Why should we aim for perfection, Pastor? Why should I try to do this? Because it matters. Because this is what actually makes a difference in this world. We have talked about the need for legacy, for leaving something that really matters. And so how far off target do you think we're going to get if we continue to settle for the status quo? Continue to say, well, I'm going to do this and I'm only going to do that. I'm not going to aim for that. Things are not going to be perfect in your life. You're not going to get that perfect 50-yard shot. You'll be lucky if you get a broadside 200-yard shot. So we have to start aiming at unheard of distances for the sake of the kingdom, for the sake of what God has called us to. We have to aim for that ridiculous thing that Jesus promised is coming. So if Jesus promised it's coming, why do we think it's so ridiculous? Why would it be so ridiculous to say, I'm not going to live that way. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this other thing and be more like Jesus than like that. I don't care if I offend people because at the end of the day, their lives matter more than me offending them. And to be fair, they're probably less offended than you think you are. People are actually not offended when you act like Jesus. That's not a real thing. It's not. Nobody is going to be offended if you don't cuss in front of them. Your friends are going to be like, well, you don't cuss no more. I've never heard that. But we act that way. And the problem is, we either don't believe that Christ is coming back or we don't believe His command to do this. We need to do more. Here's the thing. Here's why I call us to these ridiculous things. Here's why I feel God called us to this Daniel fast. And I really wanted to push you to do more in it. Because here's a reality someone in the church brought up to me. He said, I went back and I read the book of Daniel. And he says, you know what I learned? Daniel didn't just eat fruits and vegetables and water for 21 days. Daniel ate fruits and vegetables and water every single day that he was in Babylon. He never went back. No. He aimed for perfection. And it's so easy for us to say, oh, well, it's so hard, and I'm glad it's going to end. And listen, I get it. I get that it's rough. I get that we're hungry. You smell tacos back there. But man, I don't want us to leave here and to ruin this thing that God has done. Don't accidentally blaspheme this by running out there and becoming a glutton. Realizing that what this was, this 21-day fast, is nothing. It's absolutely nothing. It was a drop in the water. It was less than a little boy stepping up to bat in front of a kid who's twice his size throwing a 70-mile-an-hour fastball. It was nothing. We need to aim for perfection, to seek the greater things, to make the bigger difference. So my prayer for us is that we would continue to do that. That as we close, as we finish this fast, that we would hold on to it. That we would take something from it. That we wouldn't jump right out of it, but we would even ease back into the world that the food that we want. We'll be willing to go back and say, I don't need that or that. And I'm going to spend more time in prayer and with God, realizing how much I worry about me and my personal thoughts rather than what God has called us to. See, Asa was status quo. God told him, you're status quo, but if you want it to last, clean house. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have us come and we're going to participate in the Lord's Supper together. I want to invite the ushers to go ahead and come up. And as they're coming up, here's kind of where this all fits in. See, God was absolutely perfect already. He takes on flesh. He becomes the incarnation. And by becoming the incarnation, that which is perfect came into this flesh that we call imperfect. And He showed us that it could be done. He was perfect in the flesh. He's not telling us to aim for something that's impossible. He's telling us to become that which He's called us to be. And this God, this creator of all things in the flesh, came among us, walked among us. And He said that even when I do this, I can live in this world and I can do this. I can walk among and I can love and I can share heaven and love and myself with the rest of this world and still walk perfectly with the Lord the way He's called us to. And then this world did reject Him. They did hate Him for it. But on that final night before He was betrayed, He sat with His apostles and He shared something with them that is so important. Something that intentionally points to the end. Something that He said, this is my body and my blood, and I want you to practice this in remembrance of me because I'm coming back. So every time you participate in this, you are proclaiming that you believe in the return of Christ. And then that's what we look forward to. That we gather together as the body, each one of us broken, each one of us from different places, but each one of us restored by this Christ God who's come and He's given His body and His blood for us. And He will return and He will make things new. But we take this bread and this blood saying that we will in the meantime take this in ourselves, receive the Holy Spirit, receive the blessing, the sealing that God has given us through these sacraments. And then allow this means of grace to challenge us to do more. Say, I'm going to aim for perfection. Because that's who my God is. So Father, I pray that You would bless these elements. And that Your Spirit would absolutely be in every aspect of them. So that as we take them, Lord, that as we ingest Your body and Your blood, that they would become for us a means of grace that transforms us. A means of grace that calls us to a higher holiness, to remind us that we are at the table of God. We sit with the King who has come and who will return, the God who was and is to come. We worship You and we thank You. And we pray that You would continue to guide us, to help us to aim for perfection without fear, to be those people who are so like You, Father, that the world sees you rather than us. We pray this in the name of Christ, our risen Lord and Savior. Amen.